Let's talk about the difference between 5-MeO-DMT and NN-DMT. These two substances are often confused, and you hear a lot of interviews on Joe Rogan or with Tony Robbins talking about it, or Mike Tyson talking about their experiences where they just refer to the substance as DMT, and it's not really clear which one they're speaking about. They're actually very different experiences, so it's important to understand the difference. So NN-DMT is often referred to as the spirit molecule. It's found it's a plant medicine found in a number of different trees and shrubs, and it's also the active ingredient in ayahuasca. 5-MeO is mostly referred to as an animal medicine because it's found in high quantities in the venom of the Sonoran desert toad. So when people talk about smoking the toad or smoking toad venom, they're talking about 5-MeO. So let's talk about some of the similarities to begin with. When you're vaporizing either substance, both have a very fast onset, so they come on very, very quickly, generally within about 5 to 10 seconds, and they have a fairly short duration. So DMT, I would say, is in the realm of 10 to 15 minutes tops usually, though there is some period of processing after that. And 5-MeO-DMT, our experience is that it ranges anywhere from about 10 minutes to about 30 or 40 minutes. So both are fairly fast trips, and so it's easy to understand why they get confused. But I'd say, other than that, there's not a lot of other similarities in terms of the experience. One other thing I will mention in terms of similarity, though, is that they're both very, very powerful substances. So I just think it's really important to be very careful about choosing when and how you're taking these substances. I think if it's your first time with either one, it's super important to be with a very qualified facilitator who really understands the medicine, who really understands how to hold space for you and carry you through a process. If you're really experienced, at a minimum, I think you should always have a sitter with you. Just because at the higher doses, you could purge, so meaning you could vomit, or you could end up moving around a lot. And it's good to just have someone there who's experienced as a sitter to help just keep you safe if anything goes a bit crazy. Generally, you're fine, it's just that the experience itself can be very intense. Now let's talk about some of the differences between these two substances. NN-DMT, as I said, is often referred to as the spirit molecule, and that's because it almost takes you into this spirit realm where there's beings and entities and lots of visuals, often very geometric patterns and colors. So it's like this very, very classic psychedelic type experience. It's actually quite similar to what you experience in ayahuasca, only a very short, very intense trip. 5-MeO, on the other hand, there's almost no visuals that go along with the experience. It's much more of like a felt sense. That's why it's so hard to describe the actual 5-MeO experience. And what you'll find is that the trip reports, or when people talk about their experiences, it's just such a wide variety because it's much more happening in the body, and it's much more of a somatic process that's happening. And so our work with 5-MeO is really centered around working in the body, shifting energy, releasing trauma, and there's just not a lot of intellectual or visual things happening during the 5-MeO trip. That just gives you a little bit of a picture of the differences between the two. Lastly, I'll just say that from a dosing perspective, 5-MeO is about 5 times stronger than NN-DMT. Just to be aware of that, especially if you're working on your own, that a breakthrough dose of NN-DMT is as high as 60 or 70 milligrams typically. Sometimes it can be even higher depending on the quality of the substance you're working with. Whereas 5-MeO, it's anywhere from 10 up to about 20 milligrams. So just to be very aware of what you're working with, because if you ended up trying to do 50 or 60 milligrams of 5-MeO, I think that could be really challenging and potentially just cause some longer term integration challenges. Just from a safety perspective, really understand what you're working with. And like I said, if this is your first time working with these substances, work with a trained facilitator, make sure they understand the work, And if you're working on, if you're experienced, just make sure you have a sitter with you for either of these substances. Hopefully that helps to clarify a bit of the differences between these two.